Whew, buddy. It's Romania Black, and we are on episode 17 of My Hero Academia Season 6. And yeah, I'm not, I am and I'm not looking forward to this episode. I am because it's probably, without spoiling anything, one of my favorite parts of the manga at this point in the story. But I'm not looking forward to seeing some parts of it animated because it's maybe going to be sad. So, because when we last left off, Endeavor was having an external crisis and an internal crisis about the fact that he cannot seem to kill his son Dabi, who we know now is Toya Todoroki, his eldest son. And he's having a hard time dealing with that and everything leading up to it. And Ray, his wife, has shown up to smack some sense into him maybe and have a family chat about what do we do about Dabi? How do we handle this? Because Dabi has stirred up the public. There's a lot of skepticism and a lot of people doubting Endeavor and his ability to be the number one hero, much less being a good person. And Endeavor's always been a very complicated character. And I have applauded Horikoshi for tackling a very, very dark subject matter. And that is domestic abuse. And it's something that Horikoshi handles interestingly. There is a delicateness here where if you've ever encountered or experienced it, you definitely have certain feelings about Endeavor. And the one thing I will say, and I've seen some people comment about this as well, is that Endeavor is extremely flawed. And if you don't like his character, there is very good reason for it. The only thing that I will say, because normally characters like his, I'm like, nope, absolutely not. The only thing that I will give for Endeavor is Endeavor not only acknowledges that he's done wrong and that he, is like, I messed up a lot, but he is actively trying to be better. And I feel like that makes Horikoshi's decision to include him as one of the main characters, it makes it fine because he's trying to be better. Doesn't mean that Shoto and Natsu and the others will ever forgive him. Doesn't mean that things will go back to the way that they were. Doesn't mean that they'll move forward and all be a family and sing Kumbaya. No, the last time we saw Endeavor, it was very clear that he expects that Shoto and them will move on without him and that that's okay. And so I do find that fine. The fact that Endeavor is not trying to let's all be a family, because that's not going to happen. So I'm glad that he at least acknowledges that. But Endeavor looks pretty pathetic right now. He's pretty pitiful. And Ray's like, you got to step it up, son, because the rest of us have had a harder time than you. So now you know what it's like and you need to step up your game. So I'm very curious to see where this all goes and what we do and just go from there. So I don't know what we're going to get, y'all, but I'm pretty excited and nervous either way. I've got myself some coffee, so we'll just enjoy this episode and see what we get. So, in any case, we're going to start episode 17 of My Hero Academia, season 6. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Hell. I need something sweet after all that pain. I'm not gonna lie, I nearly cried in this episode. I'm not gonna lie, I nearly teared up, and I knew what was coming, and I nearly teared up, and I feel like if any anime only watches this and bawls their eyes out, I won't blame you a bit, because this, it was even harder watching this in the anime than it was reading it in the manga, because the voice acting, Dabi's voice actor, both as an adult and as a child, is so good. Like, they just do such a superb job voice acting, and especially in this episode. But man, it is very hard. And this discussion is going to be really delicate, because I, as someone that can relate to situations, not exactly like this, but similar, talking about this type of subject matter is very, very delicate. And I know that there are probably viewers that have gone through this that find this episode very, very difficult. And it is. And again, Endeavor's character, the only part I get a little worked up about at the end is the fact that Endeavor, I wanted them almost to be harder on Endeavor. But Natsu frames it to where it's like this is not an end of discussion. Natsu's comment about until Toya is taken care of makes it seem like we're going to table this for now because we have to, because the world is in such a dire strait that Endeavor is needed as a hero. As a father, we're not done having this discussion, but we need to table it for now because there are pertinent matters that need to be taken care of. And I know that some people will probably argue that Endeavor gets off a little bit easy at the end, and I say it's just the situation that calls for that. If there hadn't been like the threat of the world ending because of All for One, then I'd say that we could have spent a lot more time with this. But The Wrong Way to Put Out a Fire is a very apt title for this episode. I do want to make note that I could see some people saying, and Toya, there's a lot about Toya we need to talk about, but the idea that Endeavor brings up Ray could have said no. Technically, yes. Yeah, the idea that the dad sells off his daughter knowing it's a quirk marriage is pretty shady to begin with. I feel a lot for Ray's character in this story, and I feel a lot for her in this episode because, one, her dad basically sells her off, and where he's coming from is he's like, oh my gosh, the up and coming hero that's trying to be the number one hero wants to marry my daughter. Arranged marriages, I'm from the US, so culturally arranged marriages are something that's just kind of foreign to me. And so whenever you hear about them, I'm not from a culture that has a lot of arranged marriages, so it's such a foreign concept. But the idea that Endeavor knew that this was not just an arranged marriage, but a quirk marriage where he was literally marrying her to have a child with him that would have a better quirk, it leaves a very foul taste in your mouth right off the bat. I will say, Endeavor's style is so tacky. Like that flame tie, we get it. We know you're the flame hero. Your clothes don't have to match your quirk, right? I also love the contrast of Ray starting out with really short hair. She has like Shoto's hair is like the length of Ray's hair. And then now we see her grown up and an adult and she has the long flowing hair. Like her hair just gets longer and longer. And it almost seems like the longer her hair gets, it almost feels like her hair is a metaphor for her melting, right? The idea that she was so frigid and frozen and then she kind of melts sort of as she gets older and becomes more... And you think melting would mean weaker, but melting I feel is just more like able to maneuver, more fluid, more able to move, right? She's not frozen in place. I feel like it's that kind of metaphor. But yeah, her dad basically sells her out. Endeavor just looks, there's a lot of visuals in this episode that make Endeavor look really bad. And he should, because that's his character in this. He's just like, this was a quirk marriage. He's like, he was choosing a spouse to mix his quirk with hers because he realizes the downfalls of his quirk. What's keeping him, he believes, from surpassing All Might is that his quirk allows him to overheat so he can never overpower All Might. The problem is that because no one knows about One for All and how the stockpiling quirk goes, that it's one of those things where Endeavor was doomed from the start. He was never going to be stronger than All Might, and his child was never going to be stronger than All Might. That's just not how this works. And so kind of the shitty thing about it all is that it seems like this was all for nothing. Nothing he was going to do, whether he had a kid with the hot, cold, half cold quirk or not, it still wasn't going to beat All Might. So it seems like such a folly, right? But God, I will say this, Endeavor has one moment in this initial flashback before we get to the intro. It shows like he's like, the purpose of this marriage was just to have children. And that he doesn't care for her at all, except to like mix with the Hamura. So her maiden name was Hamura, Ray Hamura. And that she was just to mix to have a child that could surpass All Might. That was the whole point. And Endeavor's a big dude. Like, she's so tiny. And he's like this big imposing guy. And of course the dad wanted the prestige of the number 2 hero and took the bride price. Like, he basically just bought Ray, which is problematic in lots of ways. The only redeeming part about this intro is as they're walking away, that's when we pass the flowers, right? It's immediately after he literally buys his wife, right? And he makes note that she could have said no, but I'm like, then he says right after, she became white for the sake of her family. I'm like, she could have said no, but who was going to do that? Like, one, how was she going to tell her dad no? And two, to tell her family no. It's one of those situations like, yeah, sure, you don't have to do this, but every option is pointing you that you need to do this. So are you really going to say no? So anybody that argues that Ray could have said no to Endeavor, I'm like, the odds were so stacked against her. And she acknowledges, she's like, I did, agree to this marriage and I did decide to move forward. I think that it's important to note she did make the choice to be in the marriage, right? She did make the choice to be in the marriage. And Ray acknowledges that she didn't stand up nearly like she should have. But there are so many other factors that I'm like, you can't pin this all on Ray. And true, you can't pin it all on Endeavor, but Endeavor takes a big brunt of it, right? He takes a huge brunt of the responsibility with Toya, especially the ideas that he puts in Toya's head. And we'll talk about that in this episode. There's a lot going on with Toya that kind of lead back to Endeavor. And I'm like, But this one moment, and they animated it. I would need to go back in the manga to see if it looks like that in the manga. But in the anime here, he almost looks a little softer where she looks at the flowers and sees the blue ones. And he kind of like, when he looks back at her, he looks a little softer. Like he looks like with genuine concern, being like, do you like these flowers? And she says, yes, they're very pretty. And it's like, okay. He's like, she was strong, but seeming like she'd melt and vanish at one touch. And so it's like, well, you know what? Good for you, Endeavor, that you remembered the one flower that she likes. Good on you for remembering that from your first date. Good for you. But then it's like, it cuts back, and I like that she has the two flowers. She's like, we're going to do this together, but you need to quit your pity party. Like, I love Ray in this moment where she's just like, and he asked if she's all right because he's not seen her in years. The last time he saw her, she was being put into she was being hospitalized for mental damage. So he thinks that she's, not fine. And I love that she says, no, I'm not all right. I love it. She's like, no, our son just was on TV and has put our dirty laundry out there for the entire public to see. No, I'm not okay. She's like, that's why I'm here. She's like, you're not the one suffering I love that she just smacks him basically with her words. She's like, you are not the one suffering the most right now. Like, let's back up. Let's go do a flashback here and show how you really don't have the right to be like sitting here having a pity party. She's like, you're not the only one who didn't see that child. And that idea of seeing, the fact that Dobby was like, I just want someone to see me. And the problem is that they did see him, but not in the way that they needed to, right? And they didn't act when they should have acted. And it's just like a big Shakespearean tragedy, right? But I do like that Ray's like, no. You don't get to have a pity party. We don't get to feel sorry for you now because you kind of brought this all on yourself. We need to talk about that. So yeah, the flashback. I do love the flashback in the manga. But before we get to that, we cut to the mansion where Dobby's at. Now, I'm going to say this. I do remember distinctly the manga panels. I don't think Dobby was this ripped in the manga. And they did not have his pants that low. They did not have like the hip divots showing. Like Bones was just like, we've come here to simp for Dobby. Here you go. And I'm like, I mean, if you're a Dobby simp, you just got like the full frontal almost. Like Bones was like, here you go. We're going to make them pants ride as low as we can without censorship and make him as ripped as we can. I hope you're ready. But yeah, the idea of Dobby, like all of this, like the skin grafts and everything, his tear ducts being burnt away and just him like just bleeding blood, like crying blood is, And of course, Dobby's like, he's like, I know that my dad was going to live through this. It's like, I want to see his pathetic face. It's taken so long to get here. Now, I do want to make note, the way that Dobby addresses his family, he does not call his father dad. No, he is Enji Todoroki. He does not acknowledge him as his father. Then he says, Mom. He does acknowledge his mother. Then he says Fuyu-chan, even though it says Fuyumi in the subtitles, he says Fuyu-chan, which is what he called her as a kid, Natsu, and Shoto. So he calls his dad by the formal, just his formal name, full name. his mom and Fuyumi are the only ones he gives slight, like, titles or nicknames to, which is funny because later he talks about, like, how women are pretty much useless, right? Which, we'll get back to that scene. I'm just going to put a pin in that for now, right? But the men in his family, he just addresses as such, right? And then he's like, I hope you see me crying from the depths of hell, with, like, the blood coming out of his eyes because he can't cry. Ugh. So we go back to their childhood and see Toya as a kid. And already, like, his hair is starting to turn white. He has the shirt on that says fire. He has his arm bandaged up. He says, it's day off. Why won't you do quirk training with me? And Endeavor's like, why are you suddenly saying we can't do it? He's like, oh, well, we have to go. He's like, I told you it's for your own sake. We're going to the doctor. And Endeavor looking at Toya, because the thing of it is, Endeavor did kind of create this monster. He trained Toya from day one, saying, you're going to be a hero, and you're going to be the one to take down All Might, and your flames are stronger than mine. And he built him up, like, put his dream onto Toya. And Toya, who is not only impressionable as a child, eager to please as the firstborn son, but also has the same personality as Endeavor. Like, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that was surprising reading the manga, is that you think Dabi has a very different personality than Endeavor because he hates him. No, his personality is very much like Endeavor's, to the point where it's a problem. He's too much like Endeavor, right? He's too much like his father. That's the big issue. And then them going to see the specialist about Dabi. And I feel like in this case, it's very much a you reap what you sow situation, because he says he has a stronger flame quirk, but his body takes after Rei and is too weak. So it's just like, it's like everything you wanted, the opposite has happened. So you wanted the flame quirk with the ice side to help balance it out. And instead what you got was the fire's even stronger, but the body's even weaker. So it's the worst possible quirk mix scenario. And you can just tell Endeavor's face getting grim in this situation, because he married Rei thinking, we're going to have a kid and we're going to balance this out and solve this issue of All Might. And the worst possible scenario happens instead, where it's like, no, he can tolerate ice and cold better than the flames. And you just see Rei kind of look like, oh my God, no. And so this doctor has the right idea, because at this point they've already had Fuyumi. They've had Toya, and the doctor's like, hey, if you're trying to make a designer baby, just saying, maybe you should stop, because having a kid just for a specific quirk isn't exactly the way to go about it. He's like, it's like he can't say that legally, but he's like, if you're trying for a designer baby, you might want to stop. You might want to just it's in this quirk era, it's taboo. Like, you shouldn't be doing this ethically. So I think you should stop. And Endeavor, of course, that's the last thing he wants to hear, because all he's thinking about is surpassing All Might. That's the problem, right? He's not thinking about, like, his kids and their safety. He's just thinking, well, if I don't have Toya and Fuyumi to surpass him, then then it's all folly. Why'd I get married and have these kids, right? And then the doctor suggests that he keeps Toya from using his quirk, and to tell him to, like, to backtrack, to be like, no. Like, in the worst case scenario, he could burn himself with his own flames, which is what he ends up doing. And he's like, and be badly injured. And Endeavor, he can't accept that. He's like, I thought you could surpass All Might, since your flames are stronger than mine. But why? And it's like, well, it's almost like karma, right? It's almost like you wanted this to happen, but you didn't think of the consequences. It's almost like a monkey's paw situation, where it's like your hubris got the better of you, right? And of course, Toya, it lives in this society where not only was his dad telling him to become a hero, but all of his friends wanted to become heroes too. So, and he kind of abandons his friends after a while, but at this point in the story, he has friends, and he says, well, they're all wanting to become heroes too, and you told me I could be a hero, so why? And all he sees in the media is about All Might and being a hero. So he's been flooded with this propaganda about Hero Society his whole life, and that's all he's known as a kid. It's imprinted on him. And then suddenly you tell him he has to abandon all that at like 8 years old. And it's just not, it's not feasible, right? It's not something you can easily tell an 8-year-old just, oh yeah, this thing I've been telling you for the last several years and getting your hopes built up upon, now abandon it, right? Because you could hurt yourself. And so Toya having this, I love this hair. His hair keeps changing white, and it almost looks like he's the opposite of Shoto Todoroki at this point, because he's got the other half red and this half white. And he asks Fuyu-chan, why do you think I can't do quirk training anymore? And Fuyu, she's sitting there eating her little potato chips, and she's only a year younger than him, right? So she's only a year younger. So she's almost the same age as him. And she's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm just a little burned. That's all. He thinks it's not a big deal. He's like, oh, I can keep going. It's fine. And just Dabi's just stubbornness. He's like, I can take it just fine. I know my body better than anyone. And Fuyu's like, I don't want you hurt either. I don't like it. She's like, she basically, it's the point. She's like, I don't want you hurt. Like, nobody wants that. And then, of course, Toya, 8 years old, is like, you don't understand. Girls wouldn't understand. So, like, I mean, that mentality as a kid is pretty on the nose. Like an 8-year-old being like, girls wouldn't get it. Like, you know, but again, Toya is impressionable. So is there the possibility that his dad has talked to him being like, oh, your mom doesn't get it or something like that? Did he say that at some point and it's stuck in Toya's mind? Possibly, right? And Fuyu's like, but I'm worried about you. And he's like, I've already decided I want to surpass him. And he says it. He's like, my dad lit a flame under me. Like, he's like, you started this and I want to finish it. And then, so at this point in the story, I feel like some sweets are needed. But basically, what Endeavor suggests is, let's just have another kid. Let's not do what the doctor said. Let's not do that thing that could possibly, because it's so irresponsible. I mean, granted, good for Shoto being born. Glad he's here. But at the time, it's so irresponsible because Ray's like, what if you make another kid that has the same problem? Then we have 2 kids that could suffer, you know? But Endeavor doesn't think about that. She's like, it's too much. And she's like, that's cruel. She's like, why would we want to have another kid? We just got done seeing a doctor telling us that this quirk thing isn't working. We shouldn't try it, right? That's not the purpose of having a kid. She's like, Toya already knows what you want from your kids. And she makes a good point. She's like, Toya knows that you want his kids to surpass All Might. If you have another kid, that just is going to further Toya's like mental distress, being like, well, you can't do the job for us, so let's have another kid to try this again. And Endeavor says, no matter what I say, he comes back with new burns every day. He should have been harder on him, honestly. And I hate to say that, but they should have been harder on him. They should have sat him down and explained. And he should have been there more. He leaves Ray with the kids and leaves to go do his job with all these babies. And he's like, well, what can I say? I'm like, you should have tried harder. But he didn't. He also takes after me in foolishness. Which is very true. Dabi takes after his father a lot, which is such a revelation as we see this. We're like, wow, we thought they were very different. They're too similar. Dabi just doesn't want to admit it, especially at this age. He's like, and he says there's only one way to get him to give up. And I'm like, no, there was not just one way. There was lots of ways you could have done this, but no, you didn't do that. And Ray's like, I really don't want another kid, but okay. And then she has another kid. She has Natsu. Now, I do want to make note that the anime does something the manga did as well. In the manga and the anime, with Natsu, there are little wisps of red hair with him, but as he gets older, they seem to fade. Like with Fuyu, they're there, but with Natsu, they're gone. So, which I think is symbolic as well, because Fuyumi, she still tries to like keep the peace with Endeavor and her mom, but Natsu's given up on his dad, so the red is gone, right, as he gets older. And then, of course, Fuyumi is like looking after Natsu, and then Toya just looking at Natsu like, what did I do? Why do we have another kid? Was I not good enough? And Endeavor's still out doing the hero business, and All Might's still at the forefront. And then just the idea, I'm like, you know what, Endeavor, maybe stop torturing yourself by showing videos of All Might on the TV at all times, because that's not good for you, but you just keep like digging yourself further and further, right? And you could see that like Ray has his food there made up for him, like to give him to him, and she just looks so dead inside. She's just like, what do you want? And then him looking at her. That part where he looks at her like, we're going to have another kid and try this again, and she just looks so defeated. It's sickening. At that point in the manga, I really had just completely turned on Endeavor, because I'm like, dude, why? Like, you already know this is a failed experiment. This isn't good. Your wife's unhappy, and you are so obsessed that you just can't see any other way. Like, at this point, I was like, I lost all favor with Endeavor at this point, even before we got to the abuse part, because he basically was making her have another kid. And then we have Shoto. I want to make note, all of her kids' baby uniforms, like Natsu is yellow, and she just has a bunch of striped baby outfits, and then she just recycled them. But then they have Shoto, and I'm like, his hairstyle is half and half, but did you really even know his quirk before it happened? And Endeavor's like, he finally got what he wanted. And Ray's like, oh, thank God, I don't want to have another child. I've had 4. This is the limit. And Toya, whose hair is like almost all white at this point, is just like, I like this. He just basically, Shoto and Natsu are representations of his father stealing his love away. Like his father abandoning Tabi. It was basically like having Natsu and Shoto born were like, my dad doesn't love me. He wants kids to replace me because I'm just disposable to him because I can't live out his expectations. It's so disturbing, and it's like, what a way to mess up a kid. Because Dabi knows at this point why his dad and mom had more kids. Like, he knows. It's really transparent, and it's like soul-crushing to him. So that part, Toya, it's like, I feel for him because it's like, what the hell? And then I love the snow falling, and then we see that Toya's like, well, he's like, Dad, I can surpass All Might. Don't you see? He's like, I can use these strong flames. Like, don't you get it? He's like, I've been practicing all this time. Like, with tears in his eyes, he's just like the idea that whenever Toya gets excited, he cries. Like, there's so much emotion inside of him and he can't contain it. Like, he's so emotional. And then going through puberty and everything when all this is going on. I love the idea that when he went through puberty, his flames turned blue. Like, that was the spark, right? His flames turned blue after he went through puberty. He says, I can surpass All Might. So he's like, so just see me. Look at me. That's all he wanted. And the fact of the matter was that Endeavor didn't look at Toya. He abandoned him. He wouldn't look at him for shame because maybe Toya reminded that he was doing things for the wrong reasons, or that he should have paid more attention to his son. Like, the fact that he wasn't able to see that Toya was going out to this forest and practicing, or didn't do anything if he did know about it, is just, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And then Toya's like, why don't you get it? And Endeavor says, why can't you understand after you've been so badly burned? Look outside. And what's funny is Endeavor tells Toya to look outside of himself when he's the one that needs to look outside of himself as well, right? So it just seems like the worst information coming from the worst person, right, for Toya. And he's like, go play with Fumi and Natsuo, make friends at school. And he's like, there's a world outside, a wide world out there outside of being a hero. And I do love the little Shoto thing where he's like, got the little beady eyes. He looks like a ditto. And Endeavor does try to explain. He's like, you don't have to be a hero. But it's kind of one of those too little too late moments, right? It's just like, you built him up to be this way. And I love that Natsu and Fumi look at each other, right? And he's like, then you'll forget. And it's like, no, he won't. And Endeavor almost says the wrong thing. He's like, oh, well, if you just think if there's a world outside of being a hero, you'll forget about this. It's like, no, he probably won't forget about it, but you could have phrased it in a different way to say that, yeah, it's cool you want to be a hero, but we care about you. We don't want you hurting yourself. Let's find something else for your talents that you can do that will make me just as proud. Like, he could have said so many things, but he gets angry and he just forgets how to communicate and doesn't say what he could have to remedy the situation better. And because Toya says all the kids at school say they're going to be heroes. He's like, how can I understand? He's like, I'm your son. Like, and he's like, I'm the number 2 hero's son. I have expectations. You wanted me to be this way and I'm not living up to it. I'm just trying to make you love me. It's like, all Endeavor needed to say was that he loved him regardless. And the idea that you see like on his face, like parts of his face starting to crackle and burn, it's like, and of course, Ray tries to use her ice quirk to cool him down. And he tells him like, this is your fault, Dad. He's like, it won't go away. I can't pretend that it never happened. Yeah, which is true. Like, what is he supposed to do? Right? And then he gets angry and he's asked, and that's the moment he says, look at me, Endeavor. Like, he doesn't call him Dad anymore. He just calls him by his hero name. Oh, and asks him to look at me. And then his flame's catching on fire, and then he goes after Shoto. And I love that Fumi like grabs Natsu out of the way, but he goes after Shoto because he wants to get rid of him. I just love that Shoto is this little bean with these big bug eyes. Like, he has no clue what's going on. And then, yeah, goes after him, and Endeavor and Ray stop him. Endeavor, like, it like burns off of his sleeve. And so, again, Endeavor's solution to the problem isn't taking his kid to therapy, isn't, trying to take his kid to internships or somewhere else to find, like, taking him to All Might. Take him to All Might and have All Might sit down and tell him, like, maybe, sometimes hearing it from people outside of your parents is a good thing. Hearing it from other respected individuals, like All Might could have taken him to UA and showed him around. It could have taken him to the support group. Like, there's so many things that could have happened. And Endeavor's solution is, oh, well, I'll just train Shoto separately because that won't make my eldest child, who thinks I'm treating Shoto more special than my other children, think that at all. Like, that's clearly the thing we should do. And he's like, I have to work, so I can't watch him all the time. And that's the thing, too. He's like, I'm not going to take responsibility for this situation entirely. I've got things to do. So, like, Ray, if you can handle this kid, that'd be great. Like, just keep Shoto separate, and then we'll just go from here. I guess I got to go. Bye. It's so frustrating to see because Endeavor makes so many bad choices, and it's so frustrating to see. And he's like, don't let Toya out of your sight. Like gives Ray all this responsibility, right? When it's his burden to bear as well. I will say, Shoto with the little snot bubble and it's like frosted over is really freaking cute. But I love Ray says that child wants you to look at him. That child wants you to be there for them, not me. Like, you're the one that started this. You need to take responsibility. And Ray tells him that. And Endeavor, all he can say is, I can only show him the world of a hero. So you get where Endeavor's coming from. He's like, well, in Endeavor's mind, he's like, everything I show him is just going to make him angrier. So I'll just leave. And if it's out of sight, out of mind, he won't think about me. But I'm like, Endeavor, this kid is like you. Would you really be happy if that was you? So it's like, Endeavor, you get why he makes the decisions that he does, but he makes all the wrong decisions and doesn't take responsibility. And then it just makes things worse. And so, yeah, and then he leaves Ray. And Ray, I loved in the manga when Ray goes hero. She's like, you're not a hero. Like that may be what they call you. Like that one moment before the present timeline where Ray stands up for herself and she's like, hero. And she stops him. She's like, you're just running away. Because that's true. He was just running away. He didn't want to deal with the problem. And, oh, that look. I like that they have Toya Todoroki Dabi. Yeah. And so then Toya, we cut to them being older, and Natsu is 8. and already taller, right? Because he takes more after Endeavor in terms of his size. And Fuyu takes after the mom. Fuyumi is 12. And then Dabi is 13. They have like computers. They have their own computer setup. They got like a sweet little personal computer lab. And then he's 13. And we go back to the ball scene. We go back to the scene with them in the ball. Now, a lot of people point out that in the manga and in the anime, originally his hair was all red. And this was the way for Hirokoshi to change that, and that it goes white. But I mean, I don't think anybody really notices or cares. But then we have the infamous scene where Shoto gets drug away. He's 5 years old and gets drug away to train. And again, Endeavor makes all the wrong decisions. Tells Shoto they're from a different world, that he can't hang out with them. And Shoto's like, I just want to play with them once. And again, you get that Endeavor's worried that Shoto's going to get injured by Toya, but they don't do anything about Toya. Endeavor doesn't do anything about Toya. He doesn't set him down, tell him he can't hurt Shoto. He doesn't like discipline him, anything. He just ignores and runs away from the problem and lets it fester. And says, well, if I just keep away from him, it'll be fine. And we get the other side of this scene, finally, where as Endeavor's dragging Shoto away, we see Toya on the ground, and he looks up and sees Endeavor dragging Shoto away. Being like, oh, you want to go play with your favorite kid. I could make an Arrested Development joke where Endeavor's like Lucille Bluth. And she's like, I love all my kids equally. I don't care for Toya. That's what it feels like, right? That's what it feels like. But yeah. It's just, how would Toya not think that when he doesn't see, Toya doesn't see the other side of the ball where Shoto doesn't want to be with his dad. He just sees Endeavor hanging out with Shoto and thinks, oh, you're with your favorite child, not with the rest of us. We're all just useless to you. We're the discarded ones. And he says, I was wrong back then. Shoto didn't do anything wrong. But Dad was wrong too. So yeah, so Dabi says, he's like, Shoto didn't really do anything wrong. He's like, I was mistaken. Shoto didn't know what was going on. He's like, but my father was incorrect. And so as he's telling Natsu this, he's like, we're failures, so he never talks to us. There's some kind of psychological thing going on here too, where Dabi's sitting there crying. Again, Dabi gets so over emotional, he just cries all the time. But there is something to say about the fact that Dabi, he spends his time like the fact that multiple nights he's been at night crying to Natsu, just going on these big rants about his dad and Shoto and everything. And it's like red flag central. This kid needs some therapy and some help, but nobody's giving it to him. And he's like, he's failures, so he never talks to us. It's amazing if you think about it, having kids he doesn't need. Like, that's just how he thinks that they all view. He's like, that's what a modern hero is. So yeah, Dabi's whole worldview about hero society and everything was being shaped as a kid like this. And it's so disturbing and messed up. And then Natsu, he's like, you've told me a million times. Like, Natsu, like, they're teenage, preteen kids. Natsu's like, you keep talking about this. He's like, can't you go tell Fuyumi? Like, come on. He's like, why don't you go tell sis next time? And again, nobody is seeing Toya. Not his brother, not his sister. Well, his sister probably gets the closest to seeing him, but he's so stubborn. He's like, are you blaming me too, Natsu? Like Toya just doesn't feel like anybody's listening to him. And it just completely warps him. He's like, please don't. I'm telling you this because you're the only one who understands. Which Natsu's been the only one that has felt that way towards Endeavor as well. He's like, right, all the women in our family are useless. And it's like, so Dabi doesn't like women. But that part there sounds like, it almost reads to me in the moment like it's a line that Horikoshi is suggesting that Endeavor has said that before. And Dabi has taken it to heart since he was a kid. So make that with what you will. But he says they're all useless. And then we cut to him and his mom having the conversation where she tries to stop him. She's like, why don't you go play with your classmates? And he's like, I don't need friends. So at this point, Toya is just isolating himself from everyone. He's like, I don't want friends, which you can't blame him. They all want to become heroes. He's like, don't you understand? I don't want to be around these kids that keep reminding me of something I can't ever be. He's like, our worlds are different. And so that's when Ray has the conversation with Toya that she had with Shoto, where she says, do you really want to become a hero? And God, the contempt he stares at her with. He just stares at her with such contempt. And she's like, it seems that you're bound by your father and suffering. Like you're bound to what your father has told you and it's making you suffer. And just his is just going red, like, what do you want me to do then? And she says, there are lots of paths. You have countless choices. And she means well, but it's like, the only thing Toya can see is like, oh, you're just trying to pity me. And you're just blaming, saying that I'm just blaming my dad and not realizing that there's other paths for me. And he just gets so mad. And she's like, don't just look at your father. Look outside to the rest of the world. Like she tries to give him the right advice, but man, she's like, I want you to find something you really want to be out there. And he's like, I wanted to be a hero. And that's when he's like, what do you know? He's like, did you read a self-help book or something? Oh, he's like, Grandma and Grandpa were poor and that's why they sold you, right? You had no choice but to do what they said. He's like, that's why I was born. And just, he's like, you were complicit too, Mom. Like that look he gives her is the same look that Endeavor has given her. Like it's the same look of his father. And in that moment, he's like, you tell me about choice. You didn't have any choices. You had to do what you had to do, right? He's like, you were complicit in everything. He's like, why do I have to be? He's like, am I going to end up being like you and being forced to do something because I can't have this one choice? Oh, it's just that whole moment is like, And the look he has, it's just like Endeavor's. And he's like, the fire wouldn't be extinguished. He's like, I was younger and smaller than most of the kids in my grade, and I hit puberty. And we have like the buckets of water beside him to like help put out the fire. He's like, and as my body changed, my flames turned from red to blue. Like they got hotter and hotter. And he's like, when I get excited, there's a direct link to my firepower. And so, yeah, he has like the flames coming out of his stomach instead of his arms. Like it's just coming out of his entire body. But then, yeah, and his hair and him crying. He's like, why does getting excited make me cry? And it's like, it's making him cry because he's like in pain, right? He's like in pain and has all this emotion. That's why he's crying. And then he goes to Endeavor to like tell him to come to the mountains to see what he can do. And Endeavor freaks out and sees that he's burnt himself. And is like, didn't I tell you? He's been practicing on places where no one could see. And he gets so mad. And then, but Toya just dances around. Like he shuffles his little feet, does his little dance. And says, it's really cool. I want you to see. I might be able to get to Shoto's level. Like he doesn't get, like Endeavor can't get through his head that he thinks that his dad just doesn't love him because he's not strong enough. And that if he keeps getting stronger, his dad will love him. And all Endeavor needed to do was sit down and tell him that he loved him no matter what. And that's why he was worried about him. But he didn't do it. And so he keeps thinking that he just needs to get stronger. He's like, I don't think I'd lose to All Might either. And then like this kid is so messed up where he's like, I'm sure you'd have to accept it too. He's like, and I'll make you glad I was born. Like, that's all he wants. He wants his dad to tell him he was happy he was born and for him to act like it. And it's heartbreaking. And Endeavor gets so mad. And when you hear the slap, you think that maybe he slapped Toya, but then he slaps Ray. And at this point in the story, it's pretty bad. There's like no excuse for Endeavor at this point. Why didn't you stop Toya? And she's like, he won't listen to me. Why weren't you around to stop him? That's the thing too. He gets mad at her for not stopping him. I'm like, you didn't stop him either. You didn't do shit. And Shoto just sitting there screaming, saying not to bully his mom. Like, it's hard. And then Natsu and Fuyumi are like in the other room, and Fuyumi having her hand over Natsu's ears so he can't hear. God, it's hard. It's so hard. And then she like looks up to him and tells Endeavor, she's like, my options were limited. I chose and move forward on my own feet. And she's like, her resolve to move forward despite the circumstances is not too unsimilar to Dabi choosing the same thing as a kid. At least I thought that I would try to keep smiling. She's like, I'll try to be smiling no matter what happens. And then she says, I couldn't stop him. God, her face. And he says, you do it, I'm not going. And when he said, you do it, I'm not going to, oh, like I was about to cry in this episode at this point. Because he's like, if you told me that at this point Endeavor's irredeemable to you, I would not blame you for thinking that. Because at this point, he pretty much is. He's pretty irredeemable at this point. And she's just like, I've tried, and you're not trying hard enough either. Which is why I feel like he gets off a little easy at the end of this. Because I'm like, no, Endeavor deserves to suffer a bit, because that's just so damn hard. And he tells her to do it. And she's like, what can you see right now? Stop looking at me with those eyes. And sees Toya with the same eyes. And then sees Shoto with the same eyes. And then that's when she couldn't handle it anymore. And that's when she puts the pot and breaks the pot over his head with the scarring. And she's like, I was made to isolate at a hospital. And I heard about Toya there. And my mind broke completely. Yeah. And then we cut from her crying and everything breaking to seeing Toya in the mountains, like sitting the very same way he was sitting on the couch when he admitted everything, saying, I'm not going to cry. And she's like, you didn't go to the mountains that day. And Endeavor's like, if I had gone, I think I would have just added fuel to the flames of his emotions. I'm like, he basically ran away. He just ran away from everything. And then Toya's like, he never came. And Toya felt abandoned. He's like, I don't think I would have known what to say to him. Yeah, that at the end of the day, that's really what it is. Endeavor had no clue how to handle the situation. He had no clue how to be a father. He had no clue how to parent or raise his child. He only wanted a kid. He was not ready to be a parent, did not want a kid for any other reason other than to try to accomplish a goal that he couldn't accomplish, which is not the reason you have kids. And in the end was not able to do anything because he just didn't have any will or knowledge of what to do. And it's like, well, that's nice to say, but you still should have done something. He just ran away and ignored the problem, thinking it wouldn't get worse than it already was. And then Toya, like, the idea of Toya's, the metaphor of Toya's tears becoming flames, and like that being the catalyst to lighting him on fire, and that being the thing. In the manga, they say that all they found was a piece of his jaw, which obviously Toya has like all this grafted on, right? So obviously a piece of his jaw fell off, and that's what they found. And by that point, we find out that obviously he was taken away, and obviously stuff happened, but yeah, and Ray's like, it was the same for me. But I'm like, I feel like Ray gets the short end of the stick. I'm like, Endeavor was way more responsible for a lot of this and did a ton less than Ray, right? And Dabi remembering that, I like that the fireplace that he lit was blue flames, right? And saying that everything was really hot. And he's like, you reap what you sow. All you taught me was how to increase my firepower. That's so grisly. And yeah, they see Endeavor looking for him. He's like, after I killed Toya, I couldn't go back. all I could do was concentrate on Shoto and seeing that image of his. What's crazy is the image of Endeavor with his hands around Shoto is not dissimilar from the image of Overhaul with his hands around Eri. Like, it's the same type of metaphor, right? Ugh, it's awful. And Ray saying, as your feelings escalated, you became repulsive to me. And I even started to see vestiges of you in the children, which is funny. We talk about vestiges with One for All, and we talk about the different vestiges over time, like lingering in Deku. But she was starting to see Endeavor in her children, and she hated Endeavor, so she didn't know what to do about her kids. And then we cut to Fuyumi, and she's like, I knew we were breaking apart, but I was too scared to dig deep. She's like, I just wanted to keep up appearances. She's like, I was just trying to hold together this family falling apart. And then Natsu looking at Endeavor and saying, you started it all. You were the cause. But if I'd been able to knock some sense into Toya, he wouldn't have turned into Dabi. So yeah, all of them take responsibility, but they admit, I do like that Natsu points out saying, you started this all by wanting to have this quirk marriage. You started everything. You bear the most responsibility, but we all have a part to play in it. He's like, I would have been able to maybe do stuff for my brother if I'd stood up to him. And Ray saying the responsibility is not yours to bear alone. And so even if your spirit is broken, we'll help you stand up because we need to solve this problem. You're not going to run away anymore. She's like, you have no choice but to fight Dabi. I like that she doesn't call him Toya. She calls him Dabi. She's like, he's not your son anymore. He's a villain. He's Dabi. You're going to have to fight him. She's like, you're not running away from this. You're not pushing it onto your son, Shoto. It's not his responsibility. You need to settle the score. And I like that he's like, are you really Ray? It's like, yeah. She's like, yeah. Our child, who suffered much more than we did, called me mother again, even though he had every right to hate me. And the funny thing is Toya calls her mom too, right? And then he made friends at UA. I do like that. Granted, I know the significance of Deku fighting Shoto in season 2, and that was like the catalyst for all of this. I get it. It's just hilarious out of context. If you look to say, oh, he made friends, and it's Deku punching the shit out of him. It's kind of hilarious in hindsight. And Shoto talking. His voice isn't quite as cracked as Hawk's, but saying, before coming here, I talked to my mom. I thought you couldn't fight anymore. I thought I had no choice but to do it myself. And I think at that point, Ray was like, no, you're not fighting your older brother alone. No, we're going to go find your dad. We're going to talk. Enough of this. We're done with this. We're not going to just let this sit like this. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And for Shoto to be the bigger person to say, whenever you're done crying, stand up. Like, Shoto can't look at his father right now because he's like, he doesn't want to look at this pitiful man crying in front of him. Probably because he'd get, there's too much emotion there. But he's like, look, whenever you're done, let's stand up and take care of this. Like, let's get this done with. It's like, once you're done crying, stand up. And we're going to stop Toya together. Like, we're the Todoroki family. We're going to get together and solve this problem. Right? And then, of course, I like that Natsu, Fuyumi and Ray both look the same. They're both like, and Natsu's just like, let's do this. Let's get this over with. And then it's this big moment, and Endeavor's blubbering like an idiot. And that's when Hawks and Best Jeanist show up. And on the one hand, I'm like, I almost wish Hawks and Best Jeanist hadn't ruined the mood and came in there. But on the other hand, it's almost like levity at this point where it's like, okay, we really actually need them to be here. And then, of course, Best Jeanist and them. Of course, Hawks. Hawks is like the adopted family member, him coming in. Will you let us join your family trip? Oh, my God. And he's using the wiretap thing. I like that Endeavor's like, what? And Shoto's like, what? And then Fuyumi like bows. Natsu's like, excuse me. And then Ray just like getting on her hands and knees to apologize. And they're like, oh, no, please don't do this. And she said she apologizes for Dabi's actions. And I like that Hawks tries like, no, that's not why we're here. Please don't. Please stop. Like, please stop, ma'am. And Best Jeanist being like, a gentleman and asking her to, he's like, even though eavesdropping is like illegal denim. I'm like, illegal denim? What even is illegal denim? Are you like talking about made in a sweatshop or something? What the hell, Best Jeanist? What is this? And so the source of his resentment can be a hint on how to stop him. We can ask him about how he survived and how he transformed to Dobby in person. And Endeavor just being like almost embarrassed by all of this. I like that Hawks has no sense of personal space though and is all up in Shoto's business, being like, hey Shoto, what's up? And Shoto's like, you're way too close. And so Hawks says, was Shoto's burn your fault, Endeavor? And Shoto's like, you're way too close to me, get away. And then Ray's like, no, that was me. And Shoto being like, oh, And so I feel like Hawks can relate somewhat to this situation. And I do like what Hawks says, where he's like, oh, I see. And Hawks is like, I couldn't confront my parents. He's like, I abandoned them. I didn't want to deal with them. I didn't know what to say or do. So like Endeavor, Hawks is like, I ran away. And I thought, out of sight, out of mind. But you can tell the Hawks respects Shoto for being like, not only did you confront your parents, but you also are willing to work with them moving forward despite everything that's happened. And Hawk's like, you're a better man than I am, because he's like, even I haven't been able to do that as well. And he calls Shoto cool, and Shoto's like, what? I remember when this chapter came out in the manga, there were a lot of people that were just like, you know, Hawks is making the great family impression as he's like moving in on their dad. And it's like, I still don't quite ship Hawks with Endeavor, but I definitely see where people get that. And Hawks is like, look, I hate to break up the family squabble, but things are pretty bad outside right now. We need to explain Dobby to the public, get that settled. And there are Nomu, there's Shigaraki, there's all these villains out there, there's 10,000 prisoners running around Japan, there's a liberation front, like things are pretty bad, and we need our number one hero to help figure things out, because there's not enough heroes are able to take care of this. And the Hero Commission's out of whack, the public is in a crisis, and then he says the government is organizing a group, a commission to help the situation. And it's like, okay, they're working to dispatch heroes, but the paperwork can't be. I love that there's like legalese. At the end of the day, there's just legalese for all of this. It's like, we'd really like to get heroes from other countries to come and help, but right now we're in a limbo with paperwork. There's a lot of red tape. It's like, at the end of the day, just Horikoshi's humor of establishing that there's still some problems and some, you know, it's just the politics of it are hilarious. And Hawk says, just like with your family, this is not your burden to bear alone. The top heroes are here to help you. Quit thinking you have to do everything by yourself. Like, stop. And so Hawk's like, let's have a team up of our top 3 heroes. Let's do this. And Best Jeanist is like, I already bet my life on Hawks. It's like, oh my God. Just great. I'm used to walking down hellish runways. Best Jeanist's puns are just amazing. I'm like, work it, my dude. And he's like, look, with your family and ours, doesn't make your burden feel lighter so that you can walk again. And yeah, Endeavor has his tears, and I'm like, after this episode, I really don't feel bad for you, but you sit there and cry your tears out, have your moment, get your tears out so you can pick yourself back up. And Natsu says the big thing here, it's just until we stop Toya. Natsu basically says that despite this episode, despite us coming together to help you stand up, Endeavor, we have not forgotten. It does not change anything. And then after we stop Toya, because he's a threat to the world, we're still going to probably have a conversation about this, and things aren't going to just magically heal. I am glad that moment happens, because I don't think Endeavor, at this point, I know a lot of people are like talking about like redemption arcs for Endeavor. I don't think Endeavor needs a redemption arc, because it's pretty bad. I feel like an atonement arc is much more suited, and that's what Horikoshi has done. He's had Endeavor say, I know I can't be redeemed for what I've done. It's not forgivable, but I'm going to try to become a better person and be better to maybe in some semblance make up for what's happened, or at least move forward and not keep being bad. So I like what Horikoshi is doing with Endeavor, and I like that there is always that constant, we're not just going to forgive you, there's still this stuff that's lingering in the background. As Dobby says, the past doesn't forget. So I do appreciate that, but man, this episode's so hard. And then we have the levity where Hawks is talking as Endeavor's sitting there like wiping his eyes off. And they mention that all for one and one for all. So it's slowly starting to leak out. Deku's secret is it's getting closer to leaking out because now people are starting to question what is all for one, what's one for all, what is this, what's going on. We've spent 6 seasons keeping All Might's secret a secret. Can we do that anymore? I don't know. And just as we say that, we cut to Bakugo. I love Bakugo in this moment because Mineta is doing nothing. He's just grabbing onto Bakugo's feet. He's doing nothing. Sugar Rush is doing the most because he's holding him up. Suyu just looks so defeated. She's like, I have to have my tongue wrapped around Bakugo, and this is really gross, but what else can I do? And Ochako and Ida are just like, what the hell? And I love Ida. What is with Ida's pose? When Jiro shows up, he's just sitting there like this. Like, what is this pose, Ida? Are you like in between C-3PO hand gestures? Just ridiculous. And I say that Tokiyami and Kaminari are about to be released. And they make note that Deku's injuries are not... He's physically okay. He's in a body cast. But he's okay. It's all that he's still like in a coma, passed out. I freaking love that Best Jeanist shows up and he's like, Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. How are you? Are you all right? He gives him his full name. It's like out of respect, and Bakugo being like, do I look all right? I've got holes in me. My man is in a coma. I've got a frog's tongue around me. Do I look like I'm okay? Absolutely hilarious. It's freaking great. And Hawks goes to Ida asking to speak to Midorima, and they're like, no, All Might's requesting everybody leave him alone. And so Hawks is like, All Might, you say? I do like the little subtle thing of the wings growing back on Hawks. Like, they show the little wings starting to grow back. Like, just starting to come back to life. And then, yeah, All Might is sure he can feel like the part of the vestige in himself that's inside of Midorima. He's like, Midorima, I'm thinking of Kroko's. He's like, yeah, they're all trying to speak. The wielders are all trying to speak to him. Like, ah! So yeah, I've talked for a good hour. But this episode definitely deserves it. This episode definitely deserves the hour-long conversation. I don't have very many spoilers to talk about. Just a few. Just a wee few. So if you would like to stick around for the spoiler corner, I do have a few things I want to talk about. But otherwise, this episode was really difficult and nearly made me cry and cemented that I'm not an Endeavor fan, but I am glad that Horikoshi takes his character and makes it as layered as he does. Because there are parts of Endeavor where you can see the depth of his character and see you can understand his thinking. And whether that's good or bad is very questionable, but you do get an idea of what he's thinking and what the whole point of everything is with his character. And I do appreciate the Horikoshi. He handles the idea of abuse with Endeavor's character as delicate as he can for this shonen battle anime and manga. But also, he could have taken so many routes with Endeavor's character. He could have gone the two extremes. He could have made Endeavor's character the absolute worst, where he's beyond saving, beyond anyone liking him remotely. He could have made him what he essentially was in season 1 and season 2, and could have just kept it at that and made him just the worst character ever with no chance of depth. He could have gone that route, which I'm glad he doesn't, because that's kind of like flat and boring, right? But he could have also gone the route of saying that nothing was really Endeavor. When in this flashback, Horikoshi could very well have excused Endeavor from a lot of things and said, well, it wasn't Endeavor's fault. This is what actually happened. He could have gone that route, and that would have been worse, I think, in my opinion, to justify Endeavor. I'm glad he didn't keep Endeavor boring and just a main antagonist. I'm glad he didn't justify Endeavor. Neither of those two things happen. Instead, he rides this very delicate, very difficult middle line where Endeavor is a flawed person that is certainly capable of being hated and certainly capable of being unforgiven. But at the same time, he tries to make Endeavor a character that is self-aware and realizes what he's done and that it was wrong, and is trying to at least better himself to atone and move forward, regardless of whether he will get any reciprocated forgiveness or not. So there is at least that. I respect Horikoshi for not going the two extremes and instead taking not taking the easy route either way, but taking a very difficult, delicate route instead. And I respect Horikoshi for making those decisions, because that's, as a writer with a character like this, that's not easy. And I do think he gets off a little bit easier in this episode and in this part of the manga, but they've got some things to take care of. So it's almost necessary for the plot, right? But we'll see. We'll see. So I've got some spoilers I want to talk about, and then we'll be ready for next week. So next week is going to be episode 18. Getting into the final act, the final part of this season. I'm pretty excited. So if you're not sticking around for the spoiler corner, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll see you all again very soon for more My Hero Academia. So yeah, this episode was hard. I don't have very many spoilers to talk about. The stuff with Toya and Endeavor and Shoto, it does have me very excited to see next season the stuff with the manga of them actually fighting and seeing just Dabi get more and more built up and more in flames and just going on fire. Like that, I hope Bones animates that so well. The voice acting from Dabi in this episode has me really excited to see those parts, because I feel like his voice acting will elevate those scenes, and I'm really excited to see it. So there's that. But yeah, I think I've spoken enough on my views of Endeavor at this point. The one thing I will notice is I'm actually amazed that they showed us the outline of Stars and Stripes. I was like, yeah. The one guy in the back, the Egyptian one, that's like the hieroglyph, he's hilarious. But the one that is Stars and Stripe in the foreground, I'm like, with the pink outlining, oh hell yeah. I don't think we're gonna get her this season. I don't think she's gonna come until next season. God, I'm ready. I hope they get a good voice actress for her. I almost wondered if the same voice actress, if Romy Park could voice her, or the voice actress for Hanji is at Romy Park. I wondered if Hanji's voice actress could voice Stars and Stripes, because I was trying to think of who would be a good voice actress for her. I don't know if Hanji Zoe from Attack on Titan, if her voice actress is voicing anybody in My Hero Academia. I don't think so, but she would be a great Stars and Stripe, because Stars and Stripe, I just imagine having kind of like a more like husky voice, and she'd be perfect for it. So we'll see who they cast for that, but yeah. So I'm really excited that they threw her in this episode, even if it's just a silhouette. It's got some nice foreshadowing, right? Again, there's the whole thing with Hawks growing his wings back. For the plot, it needs to happen. Hawks needs to have his wings, especially if you're where you're at in the manga like I am. It is necessary for Hawks to have his wings back. But there is a part of me that still wishes that Hawks remained a flightless bird after everything that happened in this arc. There is a part of me that wanted to see him be flightless, right? And what's kind of funny about it, honestly, if you're comparing Dabi and Hawks as a pair, Hawks, even when his wings are destroyed, he keeps growing back, right? Whereas Dabi, he keeps burning himself out and destroying part of himself that won't come back. So interesting, correct? But just the idea that Dabi is essentially a Nomu now, since he's been pieced back together. I am excited. Next episode looks like it's going to be the Vestiges talking with Deku. The stuff from the OP that Deku has built up, him and Shigaraki's moments. That's one of my favorite parts of the OP, and so I'm really excited for Bones to get to that in this next episode. I'm really excited about that. It's going to be fun. But yeah, then we're going to get Dark Deku. I'm still very nervous because I feel like there's been so much overhype with Dark Deku that I'm like, I don't want them to overhype it and people be disappointed, because it's a really good arc for Deku, but it's almost more of the style of it in the manga that was the more cool thing than anything. Plot-wise, it's fine, but I feel like everybody's overhyping it so much that I feel like anime-onlys may be disappointed by it. But we'll see. We'll see how Bones treats it. We'll see if Bones can pull off. The stylistically is probably the best thing about this next arc, is the style of it. I don't know how Bones is going to translate with that because it's kind of outside of, it looks different than anything My Hero Academia has looked like up until this point, but I don't know. The other thing I will add is, and this is unrelated to the anime, but volume 37 of the manga, the cover just came out, and it is of Deku like holding Bakugo, and Bakugo looks like a damsel in distress that's been like, he looks like Gwen Stacy when Spider-Man like gets her on the rooftop. And there's been so many people be like, well, Deku wasn't just mad at Shigaraki because he beat up Bakugo alone, it was everyone. And now Horikoshi's like, well, I just drew just the two of them on the cover, so I've had a big time with seeing all the anti-Bakugo Deku shippers trying to justify the cover, and it's the most hilarious thing ever. I'm just sitting there on Twitter with my popcorn being like, oh, sweetie. So yeah, this episode was great. Probably one of the most emotional episodes of the series so far, and one that just, even knowing what was happening, like, cut to the core of me. So I'm very curious to hear your comments down below and what you all thought of the episode. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I will be back next week with episode 18 of My Hero Academia.